We were standing in her kitchen at midnight, a half-empty bottle of red wine between us and a moving box marked dining room at my feet when I made the joke that changed everything. I'd had 2 glasses of wine, and I was holding an old photograph I'd just pulled out of a box, and I said it the way you say a thing you've half meant for years and disguised as nothing. You know, Catherine, you're prettier than your daughter ever was. She didn't laugh. She set down her glass on the counter, slow, and she looked at me with those steady gray eyes, and she said, very quietly, "Then why did you pick her?" I stood there in my ex-mother-in-law's kitchen with a wineglass in my hand and not one single safe answer to that question. Let me back up. My name is Reed Donovan. I'm 35 years old, and I restore furniture for a living, old things, broken things, pieces other people have given up on. I have a small workshop on the edge of town with a sign my father painted, and I spend my days with sandpaper and wood glue and clamps, bringing back chairs and tables and cabinets that somebody, somewhere, decided weren't worth keeping. My father taught me the trade, and he taught me the one rule I've built my whole life on. He'd run his hand over some battered old dresser somebody had hauled to the curb, and he'd say, "Reed, people throw a thing out the second it stops looking new. They never stop to ask what it's actually worth. Most of what gets thrown away isn't broken, son. It's just been neglected by somebody who quit looking." Then he'd haul it into the truck. We don't replace, we restore. Remember the difference. I remember the difference. It took me a long time to understand he wasn't only talking about furniture. I was married once. Her name was Whitney Ellis. We met when I was 28, and she was bright and loud and beautiful in a way that turned every head in a room, and I could not believe my luck that she'd looked twice at a quiet man who came home with sawdust in his hair. We married within a year. It lasted 4. The truth is, Whitney was never unkind. She was just bored. Bored the way you get bored of a thing once it stops being new. She'd wanted the idea of me the steady craftsman, the man with the honest hands, and then she'd actually had to live with the reality of a quiet man who'd rather restore a chair on a Friday night than be seen at the right restaurant. "You're like furniture, Reed," she told me once. Not even cruelly, just tired. "You're solid, and you're useful, and you just sit there." Within a year of saying that, she'd met someone louder, a man who took her to the right restaurants, and she left, and I let her go without a scene, because making a scene was never my way. But here's the thing nobody tells you about marrying into a family. You don't just marry a person. You marry a whole table of people. And at that table, while my wife was finding me boring, there was one person who never did. Catherine Ellis. Whitney's mother. Catherine was a widow. Her husband, David, had died 2 years before I married into the family, a heart attack, sudden, the great love of her life gone in an afternoon. She'd been carrying the quiet of that ever since, the kind of quiet I recognize because it's the same quiet I carry. And from the first family dinner I ever sat through, while Whitney and her friends drank wine and got loud in the living room, Catherine and I would end up at the chessboard. That was the thing. David had taught Catherine chess over 40 years of marriage, and they'd played nearly every evening, and when he died she'd stopped, because there was no one left who played, and no one she wanted to. The board sat in the corner of her study gathering dust, and the first time I ever came to her house, I saw it, and I asked if she still played, and her whole face changed. "Not since David," she said. "I'm not very good," I said. "But I'll lose to you honestly, if you want a game." We played that night for 2 hours while my wife ignored me 3 rooms away. And we played nearly every time I came to that house for the next 4 years. Catherine was sharper than anyone I'd ever met, and she didn't rush. And she saw the whole board 10 moves ahead, and she beat me roughly 9 times out of 10, and was gracious about it every time. We talked over those games the way you only talk when your hands are busy and your eyes are on something else. About David, about my father, about books, and grief, and the towns we'd grown up in. She knew I took my coffee black. She knew I worked with my hands because my mind needed somewhere quiet to go. She knew, by the end, more about me than my own wife did. There's one evening from back then I've never been able to forget. It was a Christmas, the house full, Whitney and her friends loud with eggnog in the front room. I'd slipped away to the study, and Catherine found me there, and without a word she uncovered the board and we played. Halfway through, she captured my queen with a move I should have seen coming an hour earlier, and instead of gloating, she just smiled and said, "You let me have her. You always do. You see the danger, and you let it come anyway, because you'd rather lose honestly than win by playing small." She studied me across the board. David was the only other person I ever met who played that way. She'd never compared me to David before. She never did again, but she said it once, on a Christmas, while my wife laughed at me 3 rooms over, and I drove home that night, turning it over like a stone in my pocket, not understanding yet why a dead man's chess habits, recognized in me by his widow, had made me feel more seen than 4 years of marriage. I want to be clear about something, because I've turned it over in my mind 1,000 times. There was nothing wrong in it, not then. She was my wife's mother. I loved her the way you love family. But she was the only person in that entire family who looked at the quiet man with sawdust in his hair and saw something worth keeping instead of something to replace. And a man remembers who sees him. He can't help it. When Whitney left, the family closed like a door, the way families do. I lost the dinners, the table, all of it. And I lost Catherine and the chessboard along with everyone else, because you don't keep playing chess with your ex-wife's mother. That's not a thing people do. So I didn't. I went back to my workshop and my quiet apartment and my dinners for one. And 2 years went by and I told myself I didn't miss the games. I missed the games every single week. Then, last fall, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. A number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, the voice was calm and a little stiff, like someone who'd rehearsed. "Reed, it's Catherine. Catherine Ellis. I know this is strange." "It's not strange," I lied. My heart was going. "It's good to hear your voice. What do you need?" She told me she was selling the house, the big family house, where we'd played all those games. It was too much for one woman alone, too full of David and of a family that had scattered, and she'd finally decided to let it go and move into something smaller. She needed help packing up 40 years of a life, and she didn't know who else to ask. Her son was 3 states away. Whitney was well. "Whitney, you were always good at knowing what's worth keeping," she said, "and what isn't. I could use that right now. I'll understand if it's too odd. But you were the first person I thought of. I should have said it was a bad idea. Instead, I said, what day?" I drove out that Saturday. The house was exactly as I remembered and completely different. The way places are when they're being dismantled, boxes everywhere, pale rectangles on the walls where pictures had hung for decades, the particular sadness of a home being taken apart. Catherine met me at the door, and she'd aged 2 years the way I had, and she was still the most composed, most quietly beautiful person I'd ever known, and something in my chest that had been clamped shut for 2 years quietly came loose. We worked all day. I carried the heavy things, she sorted the rest. And I did what I always do, what my father trained into my hands. I fixed things as I went. A kitchen drawer that had stuck for years, I had sliding smooth in 10 minutes, a dining chair with a wobbling leg. I flipped over and tightened while she watched. She didn't ask me to. She never asked. She just watched me work with an expression I couldn't read, and once, when I looked up, she turned away quickly, like she'd been caught. And then, in the study, I found the chess set. It was in a box marked "Donate," wrapped in newspaper, and when I unwrapped it, my hands actually stopped. It was David's set hand carved. He'd made it himself the first year they were married. She told me that once. The pieces were beautiful and old and neglected, the felt worn off the bases. One of the white knights snapped at the neck and taped. The board scratched and dull. 40 years of a marriage, and then 2 years of a man playing a quiet son-in-law, and then 2 more years in a box marked "Donate." "You're giving this away?" I said. Catherine stood in the doorway. "No one plays," she said. It's just one more thing I can't carry into a new place. It hurts to look at. It's broken, I said, turning the snap knight in my fingers. But it's not ruined. There's a difference. I looked at her. Let me take it. Let me fix it. You don't have to decide tonight whether you can look at it. Just don't throw it out yet. She was quiet a long moment. All right, she said. Don't throw it out yet. I took David's chess set home in newspaper and spent the next 2 weeks in my workshop at night bringing it back. I carved a new neck for the white knight from matching wood and stained it to blend. I refelted every base. I cleaned 40 years of grime out of the carving with a soft brush, and I refinished the board until the inlay glowed again the way it must have the year a young husband made it for his bride. And I'll tell you the truth, the whole time my hands worked, I thought about her. I told myself I was restoring a chess set. I was restoring a great deal more than that, and I knew it, and I kept sanding. I brought it back the night we finished packing the house. That's the night we ended up in her kitchen at midnight. The last boxes were taped. We were tired and a little sad and a little drunk on a bottle of David's good wine she'd decided shouldn't go into a box. And I'd set the restored chess set on the counter, and she'd run her fingers over the new knight and the glowing board and gone very still and not said anything for a while. And then I picked an old photograph out of a box, Catherine, at maybe 30 dazzling, beside a younger David and Whitney, a baby on her hip. And the wine and the years and the long, strange day made me reckless. And I said the thing. You know, Catherine, you're prettier than your daughter ever was. And she set down her glass and asked me why I picked the daughter. I stood there. And then, because I was tired and a little drunk, and because she just asked me the truest question anyone had asked me in years, I told her the truth. Because I was 28, I said, and I didn't know the difference yet between something that shines and something that lasts. Because Whitney was the loudest, brightest thing in the room, and I was young enough to think loud and bright was the same as real. I set the photograph down. And because the woman I should have been looking at was across a chessboard, married to a man she adored, 20 years older than me, and completely off the map of anything I was allowed to want. So I picked the daughter. And I spent 4 years married to someone who found me boring, while the only person who ever made me feel seen kept beating me at chess 3 rooms away. The kitchen was dead silent. Read, Catherine said. Her voice wasn't steady anymore. I'm 56 years old. I'm your ex-wife's mother. Do you have any idea what people would I know exactly what people would say, I said. I've known for 4 years. That's why I never said any of it. That's why I let the family close like a door and never knocked. I looked at her. But you called me. Out of everyone, you called me to help you take apart your whole life. And I drove out here, and I fixed your drawers and your chairs, and a chess set you'd given up on, and I have spent 2 weeks thinking about you every single night, and I'm too old and too tired to keep pretending I don't know what this is. I took a breath. You asked why I picked her. I think you already know the answer. I picked wrong. And I've known I picked wrong for a long, long time. She put her hand over her mouth, and then Catherine Ellis, the most composed woman I'd ever known, started to cry, not sadly. The other way. The way you cry when something you'd locked in a box marked donate turns out not to be ruined after all. I can't, she whispered. Reed, I can't. It's wrong. David Whitney, I can't. Okay, I said gently. Then I'll go. But I'm leaving the chess set. It's yours. It always was. I just gave it back the way it was supposed to look. I drove home that night certain I'd ruined the one good thing I had left, which was her friendship. She called the next morning. Come back, she said. Bring nothing. Just come play chess with me. We'll start there. I'm not promising anything past a game, but I haven't slept, and I keep looking at that board, and just come play, Reed. Let me think over a board, the way I think best. So I went back, and we played chess, and we did not name the thing, and at the end of the game, she walked me to the door and stood very close and didn't step back, and that was its own kind of answer. It might have stayed quiet and slow in ours, if Whitney hadn't found out. She found out the way these things always come out. A neighbor saw my truck at Catherine's new place too many times, mentioned it to someone, and it traveled. And Whitney, who had left me, who was remarried now to her louder man, who hadn't thought about me in 2 years, except as proof she'd been right to go, Whitney lost her mind. She came to her mother's new house on a Sunday, and I was there, and she walked in without knocking and took one look at the chessboard set up between us and the comfortable silence we were sitting in, and her face went white and then red. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like," she said. And then she did the thing the bright, loud ones do when the quiet truth threatens their story. She reached for the truth and stripped it of everything decent. "You married me to get to her," she said to me, her voice rising. "That's it, isn't it? 4 years, and the whole time you were what, pining after my mother? Do you have any idea how sick that is? How it looks?" She rounded on Catherine. "And you, my own mother, with my leftovers, with the man I threw away. Have you completely lost your mind? What is wrong with you?" "People are going to think Whitney," I said. "Don't you say my name," she snapped. "You don't get to be calm right now. Not about this." She was right that I was calm, and she was wrong about why. I was calm because I'd spent 4 years married to a woman who taught me that anything I said in a moment like this would be taken, twisted, and used. So I didn't give her ammunition. I let her burn herself down. And when she finally ran out of cruel things to say, I said the only sentence that mattered. "You're not protecting yourself from something sick, Whitney," I said. "You're protecting the story where leaving me was the right call, and I was always going to end up alone and sorry. And the unbearable part isn't that I'm with your mother. It's that your mother, who you've never once thought was wrong about anything, looked at the man you called boring and found him worth keeping. That's what you can't stand. Not that it's wrong, that she sees something you missed." Whitney stared at me. Her mouth opened and closed. And then she turned to her mother for backup, for the apology, for the taking it all back, and Catherine Ellis stood up from the chessboard, straightened her spine, and spoke very quietly. "I buried the love of my life 4 years ago, Whitney," she said. "I have spent every day since being your mother and your son's grandmother and a widow in a too-big house, and I have asked nothing from myself in all that time. I am not taking your leftovers. You threw away a good man because he didn't make enough noise for you. I found him in the quiet. That's not the same thing, and you know it isn't." Her voice didn't shake. "I would have given anything for your blessing. I'm not going to beg for it. But I won't be made ashamed of the first peace I've felt since your father died. Not by you. Not by anyone." Whitney left. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the chess pieces. And here's the part I didn't expect. After she'd gone, it was Catherine who nearly ended it. Not Whitney. Catherine sat back down at the board and put her face in her hands and said, "Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm being a foolish old woman. Maybe I'm so lonely I've talked myself into something that's going to cost me my daughter and my grandson and what's left of my good name." She looked at me, stricken. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to lose all of that, Reed. Even for this." I didn't argue with her. I'd learned from my father that you don't force a thing that seized you, work it loose, gently, or you snap it. So I just picked up the white knight, the one I'd carved a new neck for, and I set it in the middle of the board between us. "This was snapped clean through," I said. "Whitney would have thrown it out. Most people would have. A broken old thing nobody plays with anymore." I turned it in the light. "But broken isn't the same as ruined. You don't replace a thing like this. You find out what it's worth, and you bring it back, and then it lasts another 40 years. I set it down. You're not a foolish old woman. You're a thing of enormous worth that somebody quit looking at. I spent my whole life learning to tell the difference. Let me be the one who keeps looking. That's all I'm asking. Don't put yourself back in the box." Catherine looked at the knight for a long time. Then she reached across the board, and instead of taking my hand, she made a chess move, slid her bishop into place, opening the game, and she said, voice trembling, "Your move?" Then, it was the bravest yes I've ever been given. Nothing changed overnight. That's how I knew it was real. Whitney didn't speak to her mother for 4 months, and that cost Catherine more than she let me see, and there were nights she cried about it and I just held her, and didn't try to fix what couldn't be fixed with a wrench. The town talked. Some of it was ugly. We let it be ugly, and we stayed. But slowly, the way you restore a thing one careful pass at a time, a life took shape. At 1 month, my coffee mug appeared in her cabinet. Black coffee mug, and never left. At 2 months, the chess set moved from a side table to the center of her living room, set up and ready, because we played most evenings now, and she still beat me roughly 9 times out of 10, and was still gracious about it every time. At 4 months, Whitney called her mother. It wasn't warm, but it was a call, and at the end of it she said, in a small voice Catherine repeated to me later, "I still hate it. But you sound happy. You haven't sounded happy since Dad. It wasn't a blessing." But it was the truth said, without a weapon in it, for the first time, and from Whitney that was nearly the same thing. At 6 months, my books had interleaved themselves with hers on the shelves, no particular order, like they'd always belonged side by side, and I'd built her a window seat in the new house's study because the light was good there for reading, and I never told her I was building it. I just showed up one Saturday with the lumber, the way I do. At a year, I sold my too-quiet apartment and moved into the small house with a good light, and her grandson Whitney's boy started coming over again on Sundays, and I taught him chess on David's board, the snap knight good as new in his small hands, and Whitney let him come, which was its own slow kind of forgiveness. And one evening, about 14 months after the night in the kitchen, I set up the board the way I always did, but this time, when Catherine sat down across from me and reached for her first move, she found something resting on her side of the board where her king should have been. A ring. Plain, the way she'd like it. No noise to it. "That's not regulation," she said, and her voice broke on the second word. "Your move," I said. "She married me that spring. Quietly, the way we do everything." Her son walked her down a short aisle in the garden of the small house. Whitney came. She sat in the back, and she didn't smile much, but she came, and at the end she hugged her mother for a long time and said something I didn't hear and wasn't meant to. It wasn't a fairy tale between them. It was something better and harder, a real, slow, ongoing thing. The kind you don't finish, the kind you keep working at one careful pass at a time. I'm 50 now in my head most days, though I'm only 36. Catherine's 57. People still do the math when they meet us and decide what they've decided. We let them. We're too busy playing chess. I think about that night in the kitchen more than she knows. The joke I'd half meant for 4 years, the question she fired back that I had no safe answer to. "Then why did you pick her?" "I picked the daughter because I was young, and I thought love was supposed to be the loudest, brightest thing in the room. I thought you were supposed to be dazzled. Nobody ever told me that the realest love is quiet, that it looks like a chessboard in the corner, and a man who fixes your drawer without being asked, and a woman who beats you at chess and is gracious every time. Nobody told me that the thing that shines and the thing that lasts are almost never the same thing. My father spent his life teaching me that you don't throw a person away because they've stopped looking new. You find out what they're worth. You keep looking when everyone else has quit. You restore. You don't replace. I picked wrong the first time because I didn't know the difference. I will never make that mistake again, because the most beautiful thing I have ever restored was a chess set a widow had marked donate, and the woman who'd given up on ever playing again, who turned out, when somebody finally kept looking, to be worth every single year. If you've ever loved someone the world told you that you weren't supposed to, someone too old, too quiet, too far outside the lines, I want to hear about it. Because I promise you, you're not alone. Tell me your story down in the comments, and tell me where in the world you're watching, for I read every single one. And I love seeing how far these stories travel. Last week, someone wrote in from a night shift halfway across the planet, and it stayed with me all day. And before you go, be honest with me. If you'd been in my shoes that night in the kitchen, would you have said the truth out loud and risked everything? Or would you have laughed the joke off, finished your wine, and kept the quiet thing buried where it was safe? Tell me below. There's no wrong answer. There's only the one you'd actually live with. If this story moved you even a little, do me one small kindness, tap that like button so more people find it. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because I'm here every single week with a brand new story about the kind of love that doesn't arrive when or how we expect it. Stay a while. I'm glad you're here.